If you were torn between two different versions of yourself, what would you do? Hi, little chefs. Want to watch a movie? Before we move into some spooky, scary movies for the month of October, I thought we needed just a little treat, a little something, a safe space for people who don't like horror that much. Now, last week we started the conversation around children's content and what quality that content should be. Something that I think is interesting to examine is the quality of children's content from studio to studio and whether or not that content still holds up. So for today, I decided that we are going to be looking at a 2007 Pixar classic, Ratatouille. We open with this monologue establishing Gusteau, who is a renowned chef in Paris and has this motto, anyone can cook. This monologue addresses his impact in the city and all the work that he's done, and it also introduces us to his biggest critic, Anton Ego. We then move to an opening scene where Remy is sort of setting the stakes for us for this movie. He tells us about how he has this job in his rat colony to sniff test all the foods that come through because he has a heightened sense of smell, but he'd rather use that to become a chef like his idol, Gusteau. We're introduced to the rest of the rat colony, including his dad and his brother, Emile, who both have this mindset of being wary of humans and how they only need to eat for survival. It doesn't have to be fancy. Remy and Emile both go on this quest to get food for the colony, and it's revealed that the rat colony is staying in this old woman's home. During this adventure while they're stealing food, Remy also finds out that Gusteau is dead after getting a bad review. He's so shocked by this news that his hero is dead that he ends up waking up the old lady and chaos ensues. She decides to use a shotgun that she just happened to have lying around in her house to shoot the rats, but in doing this, she ends up shooting the ceiling so much that it falls in, revealing the entire rat colony, and they have to flee. The rats are forced to evacuate this now, and Remy gets separated from the colony because he went back to get Gusteau's cookbook. Remy ends up running around through the plumbing and streets of Paris and ends up at Gusteau's restaurant. On the rooftop of Gusteau's, Remy notices the restaurant's garbage boy Linguini knock over the soup, and he tries to overcompensate by reconstructing the soup, but he does a horrible job at it. Remy is so baffled by how Linguini is fixing this soup that he decides he needs to intervene accidentally because he fell through the ceiling. And so he fixes the soup, but he gets so lost in fixing the soup, he doesn't realize that Linguini is watching him. Skinner comes in, who is the new owner of Gusteau's, and he confronts Linguini for tampering with the soup, but doesn't notice that the soup has been taken out to a customer. But it's okay because the soup is actually beloved. Skinner decides to give Linguini a chance at remaking this soup after Colette tells him Gusteau's motto needs to be upheld. And so Linguini is dismissed by Skinner to go get rid of Remy. Once these two are alone, though, Linguini realizes that he can communicate to Remy, and they decide to make a pact. Remy will hide under Linguini's tote and control him like a marionette, which I don't know how that's supposed to work. I can't just stick a rat on my head and then magically it controls me by pulling my hair. But what do I know? I can't cook. I fucked up making pasta, so I really am not a judge of cooking. After a night of rigorous training and figuring out how exactly to control Linguini, Remy and him both are able to successfully recreate the soup and are allowed to keep cooking in the kitchen. Colette is asked to train Linguini, and at first she doesn't want to because he doesn't take it as seriously as she does. She's done a lot of work to be in this kitchen, and she's the only woman there. But after a while, she starts to warm up to him and appreciates that someone is taking her advice. Later, Remy and Emile are reunited when Remy catches Emile looking for food. Emile takes Remy back to see their dad, and his dad is obviously very excited to see his son again, but is not happy when his son says he wants to go back to the human restaurant. And so he decides to take Remy on a little adventure to see a bunch of dead rats. That makes so much sense. That's a great way to convince your son not to go hang out with humans, is just show them a bunch of exterminated rats. What harm could that do? Anyway, Remy ignores his dad's warning and decides to keep going and to go to the restaurant again. While this is going on, Skinner discovers a letter from Linguini's late mother that says that Gusteau is Linguini's father. Since that's the case, that makes Linguini the rightful heir of Gusteau's. But Skinner doesn't want that to happen because he's starting to franchise Gusteau's into frozen meals. So he calls in one of his lawyer buddies to verify that Linguini is Gusteau's son, and he is. Skinner tries to hide the envelope that's full of this evidence stating that Linguini is Gusteau's son, but he doesn't hide it well enough and Remy finds it. There's this intense chase scene that Remy and Skinner go through the streets of Paris, and Remy is able to escape and brings this information to Linguini, who then claims rightful ownership of Gusteau's. Due to Remy's very impressive culinary skills, Gusteau's is skyrocketing in popularity, and Linguini is now starting to develop feelings and a kind of relationship with Colette. And this whirlwind of positive press about Gusteau's ends up on Anton Ego's radar, and he goes to talk to Linguini at a press conference. He announces to Linguini that he will be going to dine at Gusteau's, and everyone is on edge after this statement. And during this same press conference, Linguini is taking credit for Remy's work, which upsets him. These two have a falling out, which is not smart for Linguini because oh my god, he needs Remy in order to make a meal that for Anton, but what do I know? I'm no chef. I'm not a chef, guys. As revenge for betraying him, Remy decides to bring the entire rat clan to Gusteau's to raid the pantry. Linguini catches them during this raid, unfortunately, and kicks out the entire rat clan, including Remy, threatening that he will treat Remy like the pest that rats are if he dares to come back to Gusteau's. Since Remy no longer has the safety of this restaurant to hide in, his brother and him are wandering the streets of Paris when they come across a rat trap. Emile doesn't realize that it's a rat trap, and Remy sacrifices himself in order to get trapped. Skinner is the one who trapped Remy, and he picks up the cage and puts him in the trunk of the car, and he's eager to see the downfall of Gusteau's now. While in the car trunk, Remy and Gusteau have this incredible conversation where Remy tells Gusteau that he can leave him alone and that he's the one that's stuck in a trap. And Gusteau responds with saying that Gusteau is only as free as Remy allows him to be, as free as Remy is. And Remy snaps then and has this monologue about how he's sick and tired of pretending to be all these different versions of himself so that he's accepted by the people around him. And it's this great monologue that we'll talk about in the analysis, but I just wanted to bring it up here because it is so well written. Gusteau then tells Remy that he never needed to pretend to be anyone other than himself and fizzles off into the afterlife, I guess. Not long after this fizzle, though, Remy is rescued by his dad and brother and immediately takes off back to Gusteau's because he knows he is the only one that could guarantee a good review. And he's absolutely right. Upon returning to the restaurant, Remy sees that it's a complete disaster. The staff is freaking out and so upset with Linguini that he won't cook anything, but Linguini is floundering because he knows that he can't cook. And since a rat has busted into the door, the staff then turns to, well, treat Remy like the way restaurants treat pests. But Linguini stops them and tells them all that he is the reason why Linguini has been able to cook so many of his meals, that Remy has been hiding under his tote and that's why he's able to do anything. But after this revelation, the staff all walk out and they quit, leaving Linguini to a kitchen all by himself. Being defeated, Linguini then goes into the office and Remy decides that it's his job now to turn it around. Remy's dad shows up with the entire rat clan and Remy breaks them up into teams to keep meal preparation on track for the dinner service. Linguini sees that the rats are helping and so he decides that he will serve all the tables and to keep this service back on track and to keep the restaurant flowing. After the rats have established a steady flow, Colette returns because while she was leaving, she saw Gusteau's cookbook, Anyone Can Cook, and she decided she should give Linguini another chance. Also during this dinner scene, Skinner and a health inspector show up to shut down the dinner service, but are quickly thrown into a pantry and locked in there. When Colette returns, she decides she will help Remy make Ratatouille, which is the meal that they are going to serve to Anton. And Colette tries to go in a certain direction with it, but Remy quickly shuts her down and makes his own version of Ratatouille, which Anton ends up loving. After the first bite, bite of his ratatouille, Anton has this flashback to his childhood, and it's a version that his mom used to make. And because he falls in love with this food immediately, he asks to meet the chef, but is told that he must wait until everyone else leaves. And he does wait. He sits and waits for the restaurant to be completely closed, and Colette and Linguini bring out Remy. And at first, Anton is not convinced that Remy is actually the chef that was behind his meal, but Remy ends up re-cooking the meal for Anton, and he can see that, yes, a rat made his dinner. After seeing this, he goes off to write his review. And this review is one of my favorite monologues I think that has ever been written. It's up there. I think like top 10 favorite monologues. His review states that he is starting to understand why Gusteau's message was anyone can cook, and says that Remy is without a doubt the finest chef in Paris. And this is such a great monologue. Again, we'll talk about it more in the analysis, but I think it's incredible. He addresses that the critic's opinion can only hold so much merit, because for someone, that product is their favorite thing, or they love that specific thing. And at the end of the day, nothing's going to stop that person from consuming it. Not even a critic's review. He also talks about how he understands that greatness can come from anywhere, and he's eager to return to Gusteau's. But he won't be returning to Gusteau's, actually. The way this movie ends is Skinner and the health inspector obviously have to be released. They cannot be held hostage forever, unfortunately. They report Gusteau's, and the restaurant ends up getting shut down, and that strips Anton Ego of any sort of credibility or his job. But this isn't as bad as it sounds, though. Remy, Colette, and Linguini all open a restaurant called La Ratatouille, and it shows a happier Anton Ego at this restaurant enjoying the food that's there, and we see that the rat colony has moved to the attic upstairs. And thus ends Ratatouille. Now, I love this movie. As you all know by now, we gotta talk about how this movie was received by the public. The budget for this movie was $150 million, and in box offices worldwide, it made $623.7 million. Despite this, though, and how it sounds like it's successful, this actually had the lowest grossing opening weekend since A Bug's Life, which is crazy that North American audiences didn't really receive this well, but in France, dude, they loved this! It had the biggest debut for an animated film and was at the top of the box offices for a very, very long time. And this movie was unanimously loved between critics and audience members. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 96% on the tomato meter and an 87% audience score. And on IMDb, it's got a 96 Metascore and an 8.1 out of 10 with 789,000 views. And the reviews are unanimously talking about how incredible the message of this movie is and how impactful it is for children to see this message. And I saw a few reviews asking for a sequel, to which I say, no, leave it alone. Ratatouille had this perfect arc, and we do not need more. It had a clear beginning and end, and that's okay. We can just leave it at that. Not everything needs to have a sequel. I know that as fans of something, we want more of that thing that we love, but in the end, it normally gets corrupted by greed. So why tarnish the thing that you love? At the end of the day, in my opinion, I think Ratatouille was one of those projects that had a very good start and end, and it doesn't need a continuation. Also, in my research, I found some funny little things about the behind the scenes that I wanted to share because it's great. I love it. So while marketing this project, something that got kicked around was a Ratatouille branded wine at Costco, and they ended up shooting this down because they were like, well, it might encourage underage drinking, which is ridiculous. I am an of-age drinker, and I would buy so much of that wine because it had such a cute little bottle. Are you kidding me? I think adult audiences would have enjoyed that too. Also, in terms of marketing and branded materials, it came out at a really weird time. Other movies that were out during this time were Spider-Man 3, Shrek the Third, Transformers, and so it was hard to get parents to buy a plush rat when there were those kinds of movies out. And when it came to animating this actual movie, the amount of work and time that went into making sure every detail on the rats was perfect is shocking. Firstly, the animators had pet rats that stayed in the studio so that they could study how the rats moved, which is coconuts. I've never heard of that before. They even consulted a rat expert named Debbie DeCummin who talked about the behavior of rats and what animators could use in the movie. And looking at the behind the scenes for the animation of this movie, it's gorgeous the way they storyboarded it. I'm going to put some images on the screen, but there is just so much thought and care that went into making this romantic version of Paris. The team behind this movie took a trip to Paris so that they could fully understand the environment and how the city moved, and thus were able to replicate it in Ratatouille. Side note, this movie is composed by Michael Giacchino, who had done other projects such as The Incredibles, which is an incredible movie. I love his scores so much, and it was really interesting while researching this movie to see that he's been involved in a lot of projects I really like. He's got some good music, guys. He's a pretty good composer. Anyway, let's talk about the meaning of this movie. Despite having a lens of nostalgia while watching this, I think the message of this movie and the animation style still hold up to today's standards. Everything about the environment and the music really adds to the ambiance of this romanticized version of Paris that the animators wanted to make. As an adult, I was surprised to see that I still related to Remy. A lot of the issues that he goes through in this movie are ones that we as adults can still relate to. I feel like more often than not, people are forced to be in boxes and hide the true versions of themselves, whether it's from pressures from peers or family or what have you. We all kind of rein in parts of ourselves. We think that we need to be this person that the world wants to see, and we end up neglecting the part of us that we want to see. On the constant compromise of personal identity, we often feel insecurity and doubt on whether or not we are being an authentic version of ourselves, or if the people around us even like that version of ourselves. And I think that this movie did a good job at capturing that frustration of figuring out who you really are and the role that you want to play in this world. You watch this inner battle start to bubble up inside of Remy throughout the movie, where he wants to be a rat for his dad, but he wants to be a human for Linguini, and at the end of the day, he just wants to cook. Being able to fully grasp these themes as an adult left me feeling very satisfied with the messaging of kids' content, at least in this regard. It's presented in an entertaining enough way where children love watching the movie and watch Remy chase his dreams, but there is still something for adults to gain out of this conversation that's opened about who we really are and which parts of ourselves we neglect because of the world. I also loved listening to Anton Ego's monologue. From the description of Anton Ego's review, you can tell where the motivation and foundation of my channel comes from. Great art comes from anywhere, and every project that's out there is someone's favorite thing. To say that I am in a position where I can dictate what is good and what is bad completely negates someone else's experience with the project. Sure, I might not be impacted the same way, but I cannot say that that is good or bad. Art is so incredibly subjective, and every single person has a very different response to anything you put in front of them. Our interpretation of art comes entirely from our experiences, and no human has the same experience as someone else. I will never be able to definitively say that something is bad, but what I can do is go to every single project I talk about with an open mindset and willingness to challenge my perception on what is art. This monologue cemented in my mind that greatness can truly come from anywhere. You just have to give it a chance. And I think that that is such an important message to be sharing with children, that great artists can come from anywhere. You don't need to be a certain person or have a certain background to create something that is wonderful. This is such an incredible message to share, not just with children, but with anyone. I, as an adult, still found value in this message, and I thought that it was incredibly meaningful. Did I cry while watching it? Maybe. I'm not going to confirm or deny it. Those are my thoughts on Ratatouille, at least. Let me know down below if you have any thoughts. Like I said, art is subjective to everyone, and anyone's going to have a different interpretation of this movie, so I'm curious to know what you thought of it. And if you made it to the end of the video, dude, thank you so much! I swear, if you've made a request for a video, it has not been forgotten. There's just a lot of things going on behind the scenes in my life right now, and I needed to put out content that I feel as though I am already qualified to talk about, and I'm already very familiar with. I promise those requests will come when I have a little more time. But enough about stinky life problems. Dude, if you're new here, subscribe. Why not? We're building a media club here, and by watching this video, you are contractually obligated to join now. I don't make the rules, I just follow them. I'll send a little smooch your way, and I'll see you next time.